I'm Lisa Doolittle from the Faculty of Fine Arts at the University of Lethbridge, and this is Ed Talks. Today I'm welcoming Dr. Craig Cooper, who is Dean in the Faculty of Arts and Science. So, welcome.
Thank you.
Very nice to have you.
I'm pleased to be here.
I was surprised to learn that you were a recent addition to the University of Lethbridge. When did you get here?
We arrived in July of 2013, so this is just ending my third year at the university.
Just so that everybody knows this, most deans do not teach. And here we are talking about teaching. Mm-hmm. Why are you here?
I guess because I taught this past semester. I enjoy teaching. I think it's an important aspect of what we do, and I'm trying to emphasize the importance of teaching within my faculty. So I thought I would lead by example.
Excellent. Perhaps we'll start, way back in the day, because of course when you come into academia, at one point or another, you are teaching. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how did your teaching career begin? What was it like?
Well, it started when I was a graduate student, so I taught a few times when I was at the University of British Columbia doing my PhD, and then when I moved to the University of Winnipeg, where I began my career as a professor, I regularly taught both ancient languages like Greek and Latin, as well as large lecture courses in areas that both introduction to Greece and Rome, as well as ancient Athenian law, which is an area that I really enjoy teaching and haven't taught for a while, so I'm hoping I will be doing it next year. So that's kind of where I began, and those were kind of the regular courses I would teach over the next few years.
You love teaching, you're promoting teaching. What was it about the teaching when you started? What drew you to it? Because, really, some professors would rather not be in the classroom.
Yeah. I'm very passionate about what I study, and I like to communicate that passion and enthusiasm that I have for the subject matter that I've spent many years studying to students. I enjoy engaging with students. It's refreshing. Mm-hmm. It can be exhausting at the same time. In my early years, when I was much closer in age to them, the generation gap was not so pronounced. It's much more pronounced now. So, but I still enjoy meeting them in that context as opposed to the context as a dean. So.
Mm-hmm. Are there any particular, stories from your first teaching years that you'd like to recall for us?
Yeah, I would often interject certain things because I had a young son at that time, and to try to create some humor within the classroom. I don't know how well it ever went off. He was big into wrestling, so I'd often make illustrations from wrestling. But I remember one time I was teaching my intro to Greek civilization, and I had both a grandmother and a grandson in my class, and I'll just leave it to say you can decide who did the better of the two. So, but that was interesting. And she would often come and address me as Mr. Cooper, and I thought, no, you can't address me as Mr. Cooper. I should be addressing you in a more formal manner, because she was much my senior. So that was, I think, a wonderful experience.
Yeah, and just realizing the difference. Mm-hmm. That there can be in a classroom between students.
And I do actually, I've taught night courses when I was at the University of Winnipeg, and often we get more mature students in. I enjoyed that because they brought in a different perspective than, let's say, students coming directly out of high school. And I like that kind of mixture of students that bring a kind of new perspectives that I may have not even thought about when I'm teaching to a certain kind of student.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a good start, isn't it? And that was you didn't imagine yourself as a young child, teaching. I'm trying to get at the motivation here to see where, what makes a teacher.
My father was a minister, so I always thought I would go into the ministry following in my father's footsteps. And that was the area I was going to go into, and somehow I got sidetracked, and I haven't got off of that sidetrack. So I went to university with the intention, and that's what prompted me to do ancient Greek, because I was thinking of going into seminary. And from that, I fell in love with the area of classics, and pursued a degree. Decided I'd go on to graduate school. And then decided I'd go on and do my PhD as well, and I've never kind of left the profession. So it wasn't something I was thinking I would go into. It was something that drew me in.
Oh, that's great.
And that's how I kind of approached teaching. In terms of classics, we never have a lot of majors. We do a lot of service teaching for students in terms of liberal education, but I see my role as drawing them in to the subject and if I can persuade them to take another class, then I think I've done a good job.
So you work pretty hard at motivation, at engagement.
I try. Let's put it that way. I believe I have a lot of passion in the classroom, a lot of enthusiasm. I think that's one of my strengths. I have certain other weaknesses when I teach, but certainly that's one area that consistently comes across when students do evaluations of my teaching, that I'm enthusiastic about my subject, I'm passionate about what I teach. So I hope that comes across.
So at the University of Lethbridge, here we are.
Yep.
I think that you're involved in a new initiative here,
Yes.
and as I said before, most deans do not teach, and you've got yourself involved in this very new and innovative idea about teaching. Can you tell me about that?
So we launched last year the Global Citizenship Cohort, whereby students enroll in a series of courses, 5 courses, across the 3 areas of arts and science, both from the sciences, social sciences and humanities, as well as liberal education courses. It's around a theme of water sustainability and social justice. And so I decided to teach for that program this past year in the humanities area. So I did my course on Intro to Ancient Athens around that particular theme. I had a challenge teaching that in terms of bringing out the whole theme of water and sustainability. We spent a lot more time on the social justice area because we could talk about slavery, the role of women, the role of foreigners, the role of citizens within ancient Athens. So that I was able to achieve, less on the other ones. But we're going to continue it this coming year. I think at this point we have 40-some students enrolled in the program. I won't be teaching in it. Someone else is going to participate on the humanities side. So I'm looking forward, and we hope to expand it even further and add a second cohort. We're not sure exactly the theme. It might be around just the theme of social justice. We don't know at this point, but we're kind of working on that.
So explain cohort. What the heck is a cohort?
So,
why is that different?
So what it is you bring in students who will take a number of classes together. So in that sense, they become a cohort. We think it's important in ways of retaining students. They begin to create a community of learners for themselves. We've set aside beds within the residence so that students could actually be together, and if they come from outside of Lethbridge. So we have both students from outside of Lethbridge as well as students from the Lethbridge area. But I think it's important to kind of create that community of learners. They have now social contacts. All of that, I think, contributes to retention, which I think is an important area. Even in my experience with those students that I had other students that weren't in the cohort, but those students who were in the cohort, you could see them working together, you can see them communicating together. They would email me and say, individuals from the cohort have this question. And so I think that's a great way of inspiring learning among students, encouraging them to be successful. These are very bright students, I must admit. They're keen about learning, they're keen about, they're attracted to the theme because it is about the whole issue of social justice and how do we bring that to the world. And so that is both communicated within the classroom, but then it's started to be translated outside of the classroom, is what we hope to achieve with kind of a program like this.
So becoming more active citizens,
Yes,
that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, and they had to kind of prepare in this application kind of a statement of why they're interested in participating in this kind of program. So, but for me, it's the retention issue. And then it's also about trying to connect, let's say, the dots between different areas that to tackle problems in modern society, you need to come to it with different perspectives. And that's why we've tied various courses together. So we had a geography course, we had an anthropology course, my course from classics, as well as liberal education courses, to kind of look at this issue from a variety of perspectives. And I think that's important.
And connecting the dots, how do you achieve that? I think that's
Well,
I mean, besides the community of students who connect obviously to each
yeah.
other.
So what we're doing now for the next iteration of it, we're actually going to run it's almost like a lab, but a course that runs across the 2 semesters. And that will be the vehicle or the venue in which they can come in and talk about things that are being raised within the classroom in that context.
All the different classrooms.
Yes, all the different classes that they're taking. So that's what we're doing for this second iteration of it. We've been refining it as we've been going along.
And lab meaning, again, I'm just gonna.
I'm not running this one. So,
okay, sorry.
Shelley Wismass is from liberal education, but I think they'll bring in guest speakers. They'll probably ask questions about what's being talked about in the various classrooms classes that they've taken on the theme of water sustainability and social justice, and then use that as a venue, discuss it, debate it, explore it further in that. And so I think that will help to connect the dots, which may not necessarily be apparent initially.
Yes, I think that's a general issue with students at the U of L, because we do have the liberal education philosophy throughout, and every student that comes here has to take courses in areas that they may not feel are relevant,
right,
or what they dream of.
Yeah.
It's very interesting that you're doing that as a complete emphasis, as really making that a program.
Yeah. Often students see the connections after the fact, so we're hoping to try to show that to them early on, and then as they continue on in their studies, they can start drawing those connections themselves as they explore their own major more fully, as they take other courses in liberal education that supports their degree.
Right. I'm noticing that you're speaking of other teachers in the cohort. So another part of teaching in this is obviously being a team with other instructors.
Yeah.
How do you manage that?
So we do have a coordinator who oversees the program and try to bring some cohesion to it, and that. Again, we still allow faculty members to teach the courses as they see fit and try to bring in the theme within the context of their course, whether it's anthropology. This year it's going to be an English course, the kinds of texts that will be selected will kind of speak to that theme. I tried to bring it in when I taught it in terms of certainly social justice, talking about status of women and status of slaves and what kinds of protections they had under the law and various things like that. So I think the instructors, because they want to be part of this experiment, let's say, or this program, I think are consciously working towards addressing that theme from their own disciplinary perspective. And that. But we do have the coordinator, and as I said, we're going to have this course that runs from the fall to the spring that tries to bridge all the things together, and various instructors in the program will participate in that as well.
Okay. Do you find that challenging? I mean, often teaching is a bit of a loner's situation in the classroom. It's you and your students. It's not lonely. I mean, you're working with students, but you're sitting in your office planning your class often. And what are the challenges and rewards of working in the team?
Yeah, there are challenges because obviously we approach teaching in different manners from each other.
Right.
So there is that. Although that adds, I think, a variety for students. Again, I think I probably didn't do the best job myself because, I kind of was the loner in this one. I've seen examples where people team taught, and there I think you need to coordinate extensively so that you're bringing in a new perspective. So in my other institution, we developed courses which we call dialogue courses, where so the one that we experimented with was from politics and religion. So a course on politics and religion, and how we did it in that particular course, and it might be something we want to experiment here, is both faculty members attended the lectures, so they were completely aware of it. So out of a 3-hour class, 2 hours were given over to lecturing, 1 hour was given over to discussion, and the person in political science took all the religious studies students, and the religious studies professor took all the political science students, and then kind of discussed what they were talking about in class from their perspectives as well. It can, so I think that in that way you can, I think that takes a lot of work. As we kind of described, it's like a courtship. You're trying to figure each other out before you get married. And
Okay.
oh, well, whatever, you know, but I think it requires effort on both sides, right?
Yeah.
And because I think students sometimes can, their initial experience in university can be challenging for them if they see more than one perspective being presented on a topic, and
They could get confused.
Yeah, and so I think
And what's the real answer? What's
that's
the right? What's the
and
right
there
answer?
isn't a real answer, and there isn't a right answer. There are different views on what might be the answer, and so I think, from that perspective, you've got to be very careful, because it can be a little disconcerting to students, because they want to know what the right answer is so they can do well on the final
test?
exam.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
So that's an example that I've done somewhere else, but I think that can give you an idea of how difficult and challenging it can be, and what you need to do to make it successful.
That's it is it's interesting though, because certainly the teaching center is trying to create a community of teachers as well, and sharing strategies across disciplines. So it's interesting. I think there's a lot of potential in the cohort model for increasing that sense of community between teachers and seeing a common purpose, not pulling in all different directions on campus.
Yeah, and I think these kinds of experiments can invigorate your teaching.
Okay.
Because, if you're teaching the same course from year to year, it can get stale, and we can get lazy as instructors.
No.
Oh, well, yes. And I think, participating in these kinds of teaching experiments, if I can use that word, or these team taught, or teaching your particular subject matter from a different perspective, I think can invigorate your teaching. It will challenge you, right, to think about your subject matter in a different way, and I think that's good.
It keeps the teacher learning, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Have you got any? I guess it's just 1 year in with the cohort.
Yes. So we're
of a 4-year program.
Yeah, we're hoping, again, we're trying to evolve this over time. We're hoping to create maybe a capstone in the final year where students, if they so choose, can come back and maybe do a capstone course that brings back the theme and then brings over what they've taught or what they've been taught or what they've learned over the last 3 years since they've been part of the cohort.
Right.
So we're still working on that to see whether we will flesh that out or not. So, but we are offering it again this year. We've changed the format slightly. There'll be some different participants as well in it, and we're hoping that we'll add a second one around a different theme as well, particularly in the area of the humanities and social science.
Because this one is slightly more science-based because
No,
of the
it
environmental?
has a science course in it.
Okay.
It has a social science and a humanities, as well as some liberal ed courses. But I know other places that have done these kinds of experiments. They've or run these kinds of programs. Sometimes they do it strictly in the humanities. Sometimes they do it just in the social sciences. And we're thinking that maybe doing it in the humanities and social sciences, where I think there's some interesting courses, first year courses that you can bring together: philosophy, religious studies, history, around a particular theme. That would be, I think, quite invigorating for students.
Indeed, yeah. I think liberal education has done some course focuses like that, where they've brought together different humanities perspective, but this is much more broad. I want to go back to that word retention. So, I mean, that's sort of admin speak, if you'll forgive me.
Yeah, no, I agree.
But from the student point of view and from the point of view of the prof, I mean, we all want the students to stay. We want the students' experience to be a good one.
Right. What's
the problem? I mean, why is retention, that thing, part of our teaching agenda? Why is that such a big deal?
Well, I think, as an institution, we fail if we have students drop out, right? That's how I approach it, that, I don't like to see students fail myself.
No.
Some do, no doubt. In some sense, if students don't take more classics courses when I was fully involved in teaching, then in some sense I feel I've failed in my job, right? So I think retention speaks to the effectiveness that we're doing as instructors in the classroom and outside of the classroom, because teaching takes various forms. It's not just in the classroom.
Right.
It's when I engage students one-on-one within my office. It's when they're in the lab.
Right.
Those kinds of things as well, in the studio, whatever it might be. I think that's our role, and I know you get different views of why students aren't successful in that. But from my perspective, I always think I need to do a better job if I'm not retaining students, or if students, for whatever reason, are deciding not to stay in university. And maybe it's not their place. Sometimes
that can happen.
That can happen, and that's fine. But I think sometimes students fail because we don't give them the proper supports. They fail because they don't find me engaging in the classroom. I do a disservice to the material if I don't do a good job in the classroom. So I think it's a number of factors, but I do think we have a responsibility as instructors as well.
You see a lot, I'm sure, in your position as dean, and have done. You've been dean in a couple of places. One of the jobs as dean is to oversee the teaching that goes on, and certainly the Faculty of Arts and Science is huge. It's full of teachers and researchers. I'm trying to form a question about that. I've never been in that position to oversee teaching.
Yeah.
What's that about? How do you deal with that in your position? What are the I'm going to stop there. What do you see about teaching when you see a lot of records of teaching?
I think we have a lot of very, very good instructors, a lot of individuals who are dedicated to the art of teaching and the craft of teaching. So I don't want to say it's not important in our faculty. I think it is, and I think some take it very, very seriously. So we have lots of success in teaching. Some are much more innovative, and I think what I've been trying to do as a dean is to signal that I consider teaching extremely important. So I do it through my I put out a newsletter, so I talk about teaching in that. In meetings, I talk about teaching. We're doing a bit of an academic planning, and I'm chairing the committee on teaching. So all of that, I'm trying to signal to individuals within my faculty that teaching is important. It's one of the most important aspects of what we do. It's not an either or in my mind. It's not research or teaching. It's research and teaching, and one should inform the other. So I've often used the example that one of my favorite classes that I taught when I was at the University of Winnipeg, and I'm hoping to teach it this coming year, is a course on Athenian law. That was not my area of research, but it drew me into that area of research because I was asked to teach that course. It became a course that I became extremely passionate about and enjoyed teaching and experimenting in. Whether successful or not, I'll leave that to the students to decide. But that led me into doing research in that area as well. And
so the teaching fed into your research.
Yeah, it did. And likewise, research should feed into your teaching, right? It should inform your teaching. But one shouldn't be privileged over the other. That's what I'm trying to communicate as a dean, that I regard this as extremely important. The other thing is, and I know we're becoming a research-intensive university. That's part of our mandate within the province and that. But we shouldn't forget that 90% of the students aren't going to go on to graduate school.
90%?
Yeah, they're not. That's the number, right? Or somewhere around that. They're coming to do a degree, and then they're going to go into the workforce. And so my goal is to then provide an experience for them here, a broad experience that helps prepare them for the workforce, for whatever they do, that makes them educated citizens, that makes them informed citizens who can ask difficult questions when they're confronted with issues in their workplace, in life, or whatever. That, to me, is what I value about an education at the University of Lethbridge. But oftentimes we develop our curriculum around that one graduate student that we're going to send off.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we do a bit of a disservice to those other students that aren't going to go into graduate school and so it's trying to find that balance, and maybe that's what motivated us to maybe develop the cohort program, that we're thinking of those students who may not go into graduate school but who we can make into informed, engaged citizens. That's what I think is the key and the goal of a liberal educated individual coming from the University of Lethbridge.
Right, right. Well, we're all watching, I think, that experiment with great interest, and I think that the kind of students that will come out of that will be different kinds of, well, it'll be a slightly different outcome for sure.
Yeah, we're hoping anyways.
Yeah. I want to know about experiments in the classroom about Athenian law. I mean, Athens was a very, very long time ago.
Okay, so.
What in the world could a 19-year-old or 18-year-old connect to in a course called Athenian law, for heaven's sakes?
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to be lawyers.
No. Well, some might, you never know.
What did you do?
So part of it is we use the law, because we do have legal texts surviving. We have courtroom speeches surviving.
Really?
Yes. Or versions of them anyways.
Right.
And we use it as a lens to look into Athenian society. So things like social status, the role of individuals, those things come up in court, right? And you can see, and the attitudes, or what are the commonly held attitudes of Athens, are voiced in the court. So it becomes a lens in which we can view Athenian society from the courtroom. So we do look at the laws. We look at how, in the case, how homicide in ancient Athens was not a criminal offense, but was a private matter regulated by the court. So
you could murder somebody.
Well, you could. Justice would be served, but it's not something, let's say, that it was up to the relatives of the deceased to initiate the lawsuit. The state would not intervene in that regard. So it looks at homicide in a very different angle than what we would do.
Right.
And then there are other kinds of, we look at variety of offenses. We look at, so one that we often look at is a case where a man has killed the lover of his wife, caught him in the act and killed him, and then he's in court defending his right to justifiably kill the individual. But what comes up in that case, which is very interesting, is attitudes towards marriage, attitudes towards rape, attitudes towards adultery or seduction under the Athenian term. And in this particular case, the individual in court, who, if he can't prove that it's justifiable, will be will be exiled.
Get punishment.
Yeah, will receive punishment. Yeah.
Okay.
But he argues that seduction is a much more serious offense than rape, which again is different from how we would approach sexual violence in modern society. So those are the kinds of things I try to bring out. Where I experiment is we actually do mock trials.
Oh, okay.
So I have students work in a group where they will draw the witness statements, introduce the laws that are supportive of their case, and then present their case in court. And part of what I'm trying to achieve is that, is what was important in the Athenian courtroom system was the art of rhetoric or persuasion, right? It was a very, very important aspect. Because you're speaking to a large jury. These are large juries. The smallest would be 201. If it's a criminal, in a criminal offense or certain offenses that were regarded as kind of public offenses, the jury would be the smallest would be 501. So it's a very different context. You have only a few, maybe 30 minutes to make your case, and so your arguments and how persuasive you are critical. And so I try to teach them that approaching Athenian law is not just about the law itself, it's about how well you speak and how well you make arguments based on what's probable or not. And so that's part of what we try to achieve in that classroom.
Do you have any super high achievers there, or any stories from that kind of experiment?
I don't know.
Things that
nothing that
go
jumps
wrong?
out at mind. I must admit, I find those those, and I need help from individuals who do much more kind of collaborative work. I find those challenging to evaluate.
Okay, because it's very rich and
yeah, you're trying
diverse,
to, I often will have them submit the written, script of their case and that. But
check it,
Yeah, but, trying to evaluate the oral part. Typically what I do is I ask the rest of the classroom to serve as the jury and to vote who is whether guilty or not guilty in that.
Well, there you are.
So
there's an evaluation right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I suppose that the point of that is that the students are very active and that they're putting the knowledge into a kind of practice, like into their own bodies and voices.
Yeah, when I was at the University of Winnipeg, we used to run these kind of mini universities, and I would often this course for grade 9s and 10s, and I would do this as well. They really enjoyed it. They got into it. They were excited about it. They were creative. So it was. I actually enjoyed teaching grade 9s and 10s.
Right. Gosh, what happens by the time they're 19?
That's right.
Even more self-consciousness. Interesting, or whatever it is. Yeah. Okay. What do you think are the big challenges about teaching? I mean, this is a huge, it's a smaller university, but it's a lot of action going. What are the challenges for teaching these days, or what do you think are the main things that really make teaching a challenging profession?
I guess, students come in with different backgrounds, perhaps, than when I first started 20 years ago.
So more different kinds of learners.
Yeah, and I know there's a big debate on that. But, I'm still the old-fashioned kind of teacher. I lecture. I guess I feel comfortable doing that. But I'm beginning to wonder how effective it is. On the one hand, and maybe because I'm a different kind of learner, but I find sometimes the most engaging and most effective learning for myself has been when I've sat with someone who gave a very engaging, interesting lecture.
Sure.
So I think there's still a place for that. But I'm wondering, perhaps, kind of looking back this past year teaching and reviewing my student evaluations, that I'm wondering if it's kind of the way I used to teach is not as effective as it once used to be. And so I think, the big challenge for people like me is how do you get out of that rut that we're in, or that, and have the confidence to experiment and do different kinds of things. Because I think those are scary in some ways, right? You have to have a lot of confidence in the material that particularly if you're doing a flipped classroom where students are leading the discussion or making presentations, and that you have to have, I think, a lot of confidence in yourself, and not everyone has that. And I find
that's so interesting, because I am not a lecturer.
Yeah,
and I so admire people who can pull together
I find
a brilliant
I feel
lecture.
comfortable behind the podium. It's a protection, right? It's that screen, right? And maybe it is that kind of the sage on stage idea.
But surely, I'm just going to be the devil's advocate here.
Oh, please do.
Talk about TED Talks.
Yeah.
Like, this is a lecture.
Yeah,
and these are
it is.
enormously popular. They're all over the internet. They're, people go to these giant lectures, and somehow, I agree with you, there is a place for the transmission or the dialogue about learning that comes from a lecture.
Yeah. The other big challenge I notice, and I think this is a debate that's going, I've heard it a little bit, is, so again, for us who've been accustomed just to lecturing, we're always keen about communicating a certain level of content. We think we need, if we've been successful, if students have got this amount of content. If they get only this amount, we haven't been that successful. And that becomes a challenge, right? How do you, if you are going away from the lecture style of teaching, how do you ensure students get the content they need? Because I am a firm believer you need to have a certain amount of content, right? Before you can start asking questions about the subject matter, you need to know something about that subject matter.
And how is it that students are going to
get
that content?
And the challenge is, how do you get them to read texts that textbooks that you've ordered, or in my case, it might be primary sources that I'd like them to look at, that kind of thing. How do you get
Documents,
them?
yeah.
How do you get them to look at that before, let's say, they come into the classroom when you teach, or if you're doing a flipped classroom, so that you can have an effective discussion time or presentation time. Those are things I need to learn. And I think there's a number of us like that need to learn those techniques, because we were never taught them. And I think that's the issue as well. When I came out, I was never taught how to teach. I just taught, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I kind of mimicked who I saw and thought, well, I'm not going to teach like him because that was so unengaging. I'm going to teach like him because that was very engaging. So, I'd have a professor who was very gregarious, exciting, and just drew me into the subject matter, and I wanted to read about it, right? And that's sort of where I've kind of leaned to. And as I said earlier, if anything I do well, I'm passionate about what I do and enthusiastic. But, at the same token, I had a professor who would sit behind a desk. He had a very soft voice. He would go every second word. He would try to crack a joke, which never came off at all. But he was a brilliant individual, and I did learn a lot. But those are my models, right?
Well, as a classics student, I don't suppose you ran into a lot of, interactive games in the classroom and such like.
Yeah. So those are things that I think we're doing better. People are, in graduate school, they're doing workshops on how you teach and that. And I think those are the areas. But for people like me who've been in the profession a number of years, how do we persuade me to take that step and be experimental? That's, I think, one of the challenges I see.
Well, I mean, one of the things you said is this partnership with other teachers.
Yes, yeah.
And being part of a group, I think that's very supportive. And I think, in my experience too, that's been important, is being with other teachers and hearing about other successes.
Yeah, and not being afraid to fail. I think that's important, right? So what I've been trying to encourage faculty to self-reflect on their teaching, both what's been successful and what's not been successful. Because it's only in those failures that that's not going to work, or maybe I did it not in the right way. Like, don't be afraid to experiment. Like, I remember when I taught my large Intro to Greek and Roman Civilization at the University of Winnipeg, I'd have 100 students in, and so my question was, wanted to ask the question, are they getting the material? Are they understanding it? Now we have clickers. This was before the clicker time, right?
Right.
So what I did was something I read about, was called the 1-minute Harvard essay, right?
Right.
And so I experimented with that. Halfway through I got overwhelmed, because 100 of those, they weren't 1 minute.
So what is it?
Well, basically you ask them 1 or 2 questions and they answer it.
Really quickly,
yeah,
like in a minute.
And that gives you a sense of have they caught what you're trying to communicate to them. And so they would submit it to me and I would go back and read them. But that was 100 of those, right? And I was doing that almost every week. And eventually, and it wasn't 1 minute, it was like 5 to 10 minutes, because that's how long it took them to do it. So eventually I said to the class, should we do away with this? And they said, oh yes, we don't want to do this anymore. So I experimented. It was an absolute failure, but I learned something from it.
You learned something from it, I'm sure, because you had the feedback from the learners.
So I think that's the point I'm trying to make, is don't be afraid to experiment. Do something different. If it fails, it fails. So what?
Right.
At least you've tried.
Right. So. Yeah. I think that's a very good point. And how do you know if what you've done fails for all of the learners, or how do you know that it's
that's a good question.
Partial failure but leads into some other kinds of thinking on the students, like this professor actually cares whether or not I got this, and I actually do have to remember what that person just said.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure how you get at that. I know some faculty do kind of midway evaluations, or ask students to give them feedback.
This is a new thing, right?
And in some ways, you can then gauge whether what you're doing up to this point has been effective or not, right? And so that's, I think, important. That's one way, I think, of determining whether something you're doing is effective or not.
But it's very scary, as you say. I mean, the fear comes from, How this group of 100 people standing in judgment of me?
Yeah.
Am I ready for that?
Yeah.
And it has to be a different kind of conversation. It's not standing in judgment. It's about the
Right.
It's about the learning. It's about the classroom. It's about where we're going with this.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think you've talked a little bit about this, but what do you see as really positive trends in teaching in the arts and sciences? The arts and sciences, this is a big debate. Here you are kind of in charge of this large area, which supposedly, doesn't fit into the agenda of the world, which is busily, doing technology, doing science. We need people who have specific skills. We need specialization. We need, scientific innovation. What do you see are the trends that in teaching in arts and science that counteract that kind of argument? And I mean, there are so many learners in arts and science.
Right.
Well, you've got sciences as well. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm always thinking of the humanities, and that's where you're from. But what are the opportunities and the trends that you see for teaching? On campus in particular, even if we just start with the U of
Well,
L.
we mentioned the cohort as a new experiment, that program we're going to do, and I think it's going to be successful. On the science side, in biology, for instance, we're starting this year what they call a research internship that students can apply for coming into first year, and that will get them started along the path of doing research, which will provide them with very good practical skills when they go out into the workforce. And again, the uptake on that has been tremendous. So that
great.
might be other departments might follow suit as well in that. Other areas where I think we do really, really well in the arts and science on all sides is we do independent studies. So students there can work intimately with a professor on a particular topic of interest for them. So that I think has been very effective. We do have our applied studies as well, where a number of students do that.
What's the applied studies that you see are really successful? Like an example.
Well, I don't know if I can point to anyone in particular, but typically they work. It could be within a lab, it could be out in a community with an NGO or whatever. And then they do a report or something along that line. So, which will be evaluated through our co-op office as well as through the faculty who's supervising that. But again, I think what that does is it bridges theory with the practical, right? And I think sometimes that is where the criticism comes, particular towards arts degrees. Is that it's so theoretical, but it has no practical value. But these kinds of opportunities allow students to take the theoretical and bridge it into the practical, and I think those are important. The other thing that we do very well in arts and science, and fine arts is part of this as well, is our co-op program, which I'm very excited about, because you can do a co-op in any area that you're working on. So if you're a history professor, a history student, you can do a co-op, or an English student, you can do a co-op.
And that would mean?
So let's say for history, it might be working with the Galt Gardens or with a local museum back where you work, back for where you live, and that kind of thing. So I think those are opportunities, again, where a student can demonstrate the value of their arts degree when they go out after university and start to seek employment in that. The reality is the kinds of skills, and maybe we need to do a better job as individuals within the institution communicating that the kind of broad, what they call soft skills, really do set people up for success. If it's true that over the course of your lifetime you will be in multiple jobs, you've got to have those skills that can translate from one job into the next. And I think that's what a university degree can provide. That critical thinking, that ability to ask the right kinds of questions, that ability to communicate and write, which I think is very, very important still in our society. All of those, and those are the skills that will lead into leadership roles within whatever business that you might be in, or whatever organization you might be working for, because those will carry you a long, long way. And I think that's the value of what we can get from a liberal education at the University of Lethbridge and a BA that you can get. Sciences often have and again, I think sciences can benefit from this as well. Sciences have, from outside the institution, have a perception that they will automatically lead to a job. The art side of the house doesn't have that perception, but I think it's wrong, because if you look at what we find in stats cans, those who have sociology degrees or English degrees do well financially in the long run. It takes longer, there's no doubt about it, but they do long. But it's those soft skills that they learn in the classroom, doing various kinds of assignments, various leading discussion groups, making presentations, all of those kinds of things will lead to success when they get out into the workforce.
And what I'm hearing, as a theme in what you're talking about is really making that conscious to students and to teachers, that these, through the cohort, you're saying we're going to have a whole year class, which is an extraordinary amount of time, given that we usually do just half a year, 3 months, 3 months, to have the whole, 7 months or whatever. That really the emphasis on the student realizing how to connect these things, because you keep saying, and I keep hearing, this is what is going to produce the successful person out in the workforce, or the active citizen, or the sort of useful member of society.
Yes, I agree.
And I think that's a theme that I'm hearing, and certainly that really speaks to the importance of keeping arts and sciences around, and to teachers realizing, it isn't just the content, in fact, to pick that up. It is also the methods and the ways in which the students are empowered in their learning to use their knowledge, to use that content.
Yeah, if whatever the subject matter that you're looking at, if you're learning the methodology of critically evaluating it, that you can take to something else. That's what's transferable. And that, I think, is what a university degree provides, and what I hope we do in the classroom as instructors, teach them how to, I love the content that I teach. I think it's exciting, and who isn't excited about the ancient world? We're all. We all are. You should all be.
Well, everybody likes Greece.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. But
we don't like to go there.
If I can look at a courtroom speech and have a student understand how the persuasive elements make that speech effective and why that individual may have won their case or not, I think I've done a good job. If it allows me to have them be critical of the arguments, that's a fallacious argument. That, I think, is an important skill, because when someone else makes a presentation, whether it's a politician, whether it's someone in an organization, you can say, no, that's not a good argument. It's false, or it's fallacious. That, I think, is an important skill that they can take away, and that's what I'm hoping I achieve when I teach, and I hope all my faculty achieve when they teach as well.
Right, and I mean, what's beautiful about that is that you have the depth from the research side that you can see that's important, which, I mean, certainly goes beyond the high school level of the dates and leaders and times and, the Parthenon, and I think that's where that research connects, isn't it? That you can see the subtleties in the material.
Yeah, and the goal is to, I think by the end of, or through the process of a student getting the degree, whatever their major may be, is that they learn those skills in time, that they can come up and say, here's an argument that's been made. So let's say they're giving a public presentation within their 4th year class. This is an argument that's been made by this scholar. There are problems with it, and they can point out the problems.
Right.
That, to me, is very valuable. Very valuable.
And that's what was going to move the world forward too, isn't it? Is seeing where things that people have previously thought were working, perhaps badly, and destroying the watershed. To go back to the water thing,
That's right.
Perhaps there are other arguments and other facts that need to be brought forward. Yeah. No, I'm dying to hear about the evaluations and what you're going to do differently next. I mean, I think this is a big moment as here we are in the summer, planning the next year. You've done it once, and so now, really on a very micro level, what did you hear, and what are you going to do differently?
Oh, so in the evaluations, for myself?
This is very brave.
Yeah, okay.
I'm inviting you to be very brave.
Well, they were very honest. They were very gracious, and I actually shared them with one of our more outstanding faculty members. So I said, Harold, I need help. I think they picked up on, my job is very, very busy, and how I like to approach a class is I like to review my notes so that it's fresh in my mind. But often what happened with this past year is I was reviewing them the night before, as opposed to, let's say, an hour or so before.
Because of your dean job.
Various.
Yeah.
And I think that showed through, right? And I had a bunch of PowerPoint that I had prepared over the years and things like that, and I would go through them and make sure I knew there. But occasionally, it showed up that, oh yeah, that is there, right? So that they picked up on that. Students are bright, and I think what that taught me is I need to put more effort into it, right? That I did them a disservice, Again, they did emphasize my passion and my enthusiasm that I was carrying, and I think those are all important characteristics of a good instructor, as that comes across. But there are other areas I need to improve on. So as I go forward into the next year, that's something I have to work on, so that that they get a sense that I'm committed to them, and I think that's important. So I am teaching in the fall a second-year Greek class, which I really enjoy. It's a small class. There's only going to be 5 students, so it'll be informal.
Learning the language, the ancient Greek.
Yeah, they've done first year, so we're going to read some ancient texts. I've picked them out. As I always try to do when I've taught ancient languages, I always try to pick a text that I've never read myself in ancient Greek. So that challenges me. So I'll be doing that, and so we'll work together for that. That is a very informal session. So we sit down, we read the text, I ask them questions, they try to answer it, I try to direct them. So in some ways, it's kind of the ideal kind of teaching. It's very different from lecturing and that. In the spring, I hope to teach my Athenian law class. People are trying to persuade me not to because I'm so busy, but I'm kind of determined to do it because I haven't taught that class for a number of years, and I love the area. I just love the area. And so I will probably do the experiment I mentioned earlier where we'll do some mock trials. This will be a third-year class, so these will be more seasoned students, let's say. But I think I need some help. I need to come to you guys to ask, how do you evaluate these things? Or how do you make them successful? Because that was something I never did in the past. So I think that's something I need to do as well. So
Right. And lucky for us, the new board chair, his specialty, Dr. David Slomp, is assessment and evaluation. And I think that the Teaching Centre will be very blessed by having this level of expertise available to them. So, here you are experimenting. Let's turn it around. You've got new faculty coming in. We've had a bunch of retirements. New faculty member, often terrified.
Right.
Terrified of teaching, hanging on sometimes for dear life. Not everybody, but the stereotype is, getting up in front of these people. And you're saying it's okay to fail.
Yeah.
Well, that new faculty member is going to go, yeah, right. My dean says it's okay to fail. Okay,
so I think how we approached it, and so when people are coming up for tenure, what we're looking for is, what kind of self-reflection have you done on your teaching?
Okay.
So if, let's say, your student evaluations show some concerns, how are you responding to that? That, to me, suggests that you are a dedicated teacher, that you want to improve as an instructor, you want to become effective. To me, that is important, right? And so I like the idea that you're experimenting. I don't mind the idea that you fail, because as long as you respond to that, don't dismiss it or sweep it under the carpet, but kind of address it head on, you can learn from that and improve in your teaching, right? We've been encouraging people to have peer assessments.
Peer assessments.
So people will come into your classroom so when people have come up, when they're coming up for tenure, I say, have someone come in. It could be someone from within your discipline, preferably someone not within your discipline.
Like another professor.
Because in some ways they are not experts in your area. So if they can come away from your class saying you've done a good job, I've understood fully what your objectives were, then you're doing a good job.
Right.
And then they can also point out individuals, areas of concern or that you may need to address. Sometimes they're just mechanical, you know, you talk too softly, or you didn't write big enough on the board, or you had too dense, your PowerPoints were too dense. Those kinds of things are easily corrected, right?
Right.
And they can give you other suggestions to improve, right? You know, try to increase your engagement with students and things like that. So that's what I would encourage, and that. So self-reflection, get some peer assessment, attend some of the workshops in the teaching center, and that kind of thing. There is the Spark conference that happens every spring.
Which is a conference on campus all about teaching.
Yeah,
with
again,
presentations.
Again, you can learn, you know, seek advice from more seasoned faculty, you know, who have a reputation for doing well in the classroom. Learn from them. That's what I would say. So.
Well, that's brilliant because, you know, connecting, it's the same thing you're talking about in the cohort, is that students learning from each other and teachers also learning from each other. Yeah.
And there is the instructional skills workshop that's offered twice
Yes,
a year.
there is. I'm a facilitator in that.
I did
Everybody
sign up
should
once and
do
then
that.
withdrew because I was too busy, but...
Everybody should do that.
Yeah,
it is so much fun, and it's a 4-day
intense.
It's a 4-day boot camp, and talk about being brave. You have to get up for 3 of those 4 days and teach in front of your peers.
Yeah, and that's not an easy thing.
And they get to critique you.
Yeah.
But wonderful.
Yeah, so again, those are...
A very intense version of the peer in the classroom
that's
kind of
right,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of support, and I'm sure that the new faculty member that comes to this dean is a lucky one.
Well, thank you.
I'd like to thank you so much for
My pleasure
taking
to be
time.
here.
You're a busy guy, and obviously I can see that out of that big agenda, you're still dedicating time to teaching. So I think that speaks, you know, volumes to the people that you work with.
This was fun.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks again.